Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you here. I'm Matt Gandel, President of Education Strategy Group, and I'm very excited to invite all of you here, live in person and online, for the launch of the Level Up Coalition. I want to offer a special welcome to all of our local, state, and national partners who are here with us today. Appreciate all your support and your engagement to get this effort off the ground, and we're really looking forward to working together on this important crusade. As we're all aware, a high school diploma is no longer sufficient currency for young people in our country to have options. It once was, but those days are long behind us. Today, all students need to be prepared to continue their education after high school to have any chance at success. In fact, coming out of the Great Recession in 2010, 99% of all new jobs created require some level of post-secondary education or training beyond high school. That doesn't necessarily mean, however, a four-year degree, as we all know. There are more than 30 million good jobs in this country that pay a family-sustaining wage that require less than a BA but more than a high school diploma, and we expect those numbers to grow in the future. So, today and in the future, education and training beyond high school is the most certain path to economic self-sufficiency for our young people and, frankly, increasingly for our adults who are trying to get back into the system to upskill. Earning a post-secondary credential of value, be that a certificate, an associate's degree, or a bachelor's degree, opens doors to jobs that can support a family. And we think all students deserve this opportunity, every one of them. Yet too few get it, especially students of color, those who come from low-income families, and those who are the first in their families to attend college. Today, we say that must change. For the past decade, the quality of the American education system has come under the microscope, and the resulting improvements have largely been positive. Higher academic expectations, greater access to community college and four-year colleges, and greater emphasis, especially recently, on paying attention to career readiness as well as college readiness. While there have been measurable successes, the U.S. continues to fall short of national education and employment goals. The gaps between our projected workforce demands and our current educational attainment rates are too large for any one sector to close on its own. It will take strong collaboration between K-12 and higher education and the workforce sectors to close those gaps and truly accelerate progress in our country. Nearly every state in the nation has set a post-secondary attainment goal aligned to their workforce projections. That's very important. While the goals may differ from state to state, the priority is consistent, getting significantly more individuals, both young people and adults, a credential that has labor market value. Over the past decade, as a result of leadership, very strong leadership in both states and communities around the country, the percentage of adults with a credential of value, a post-secondary credential of value, has increased from 38% to 48%. That's significant growth, and we should celebrate it. And yet, even in states with the highest attainment rates, as you can see on this map, there's still a long way to go. Nearly every state is more than 10 percentage points away from meeting their attainment goal. And the clock is ticking as employers and industries continue to up their expectations every day. Despite the overall improvements in post-secondary attainment rates, significant equity gaps remain. For instance, the percentage of white adults with an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, as you can see here in this graphic, is higher than double that of Hispanic attainment in the U.S. Too many students, especially low-income, first-generation, and students of color, persistently stumble at that key transition point where they move from high school to higher education. And they often stumble again from those programs into the workforce. This is discouraging for students, it's inefficient for our education system, it's costly to our economy and our society, and frankly, it's a problem we can solve. Meeting workforce needs and closing preparation attainment gaps requires teamwork between K-12 and post-secondary. My daughter, who's a high school freshman, just made her high school track team. And in going to some of those meets, it seems to me there's a lesson we can learn from those young people. If you think of the relay race, for example, runners on the most successful teams approach the handoff with both running at a full sprint when the baton is passed. The first runner doesn't slow down, and the second runner doesn't start from a full stop. That's how they maintain momentum. Our education system often approaches this handoff from high school to college at a dead stop. Oftentimes there is no handoff at all, just the completion of one leg, a sizable gap before the completion of the next leg. If we're to help millions more students find success, K-12 and higher education must facilitate seamless handoffs. We all share responsibility for accelerating students to that finish line. Now let me just say, this is hard work. It requires intentional effort to collaborate across our two sectors, and frankly, oftentimes the incentives are not aligned. It's easier to stay in our lanes, but what we're here to say today is that staying in our lanes won't work if we want to help students. We've got to cross those imaginary lines, we've got to break down the silos and figure out a way to work together. It's hard work, but it's the right work. That's why today we're launching Level Up. Level Up is a coalition of local, state, and national K-12 and higher education leaders who are working across the lines to ensure that the transition between high school and higher education is a launch pad and not a hurdle. We believe that educational attainment should not end with a high school diploma. Successful post-secondary transitions should become the new normal for all young people in this country. We have come together to use our collective voice and capacity to increase the number of states and communities that are willing to make this a top priority. We owe it to our students to remove these unnecessary burdens, these frustrations and inefficiencies as they pursue something our society very much needs them to: completing high school, earning a post-secondary credential of value, and entering the workforce ready to thrive. We have a very strong group of partners that are joining us here, and I'm very proud to show you here up on the board all the national organizations that are part of this work. And these are organizations representing K-12 and higher education constituencies at the local, state, and national level. And importantly, this is a bipartisan group of organizations unified in our mission to increase opportunity and expand access. Level Up partners will make post-secondary transitions a highly visible part of the education policy agenda, and they'll do so across sectors. We'll highlight places around the country that are doing extraordinary work, and we'll unpack how they're doing it so it becomes ordinary. We will lend our voice and assistance in communities and states to bring about action on behalf of our students. And importantly, as I said, we'll focus our work on closing equity gaps, recognizing that traditionally underserved students have the most to gain from our efforts and the most to lose if we don't successfully pass the baton. We're also pleased today to announce a very powerful advisory council that will guide the work of the Level Up Coalition. You can see up here on the board the names, and very pleased that many of them are here today to join us. These are leaders in K-12 and post-secondary at the national, state, and community level who are showing us how this can be done, and we're looking forward to getting their guidance and counsel as we move forward in this work. The good news here is we don't need to create new strategies from whole cloth. Collectively, we know what works to increase students' post-secondary preparation and success. And we have examples from communities and states around the country that are getting results. From these examples, we've identified 3 critical pillars that make up a robust, collaborative post-secondary transition strategy: aligned expectations, seamless transitions, and navigational supports. We're pleased this morning to be releasing a report, the first of the Level Up Coalition, that's more clearly laying out these strategies and pointing to highly successful communities and states that are driving action based on these themes. I hope you'll take a look. The evidence is very compelling that this is doable. Let me give you a few highlights this morning. First, aligned expectations. As a country, we continue to face what we call an expectations gap. Students intend to continue their education and go to college. You can see 84% of high school students nationally plan to do so, but large numbers are unprepared for success. As a result, about 40% of students that leave high school and enroll in higher education will need remediation. And we all know that usually doesn't end well. Students that take a remedial course in our community colleges in the U.S., and that's where the majority of remediation occurs, have a 1 in 10 chance of earning a credential in 3 years. 1 in 10 chance, 10%, who go into remediation community colleges will ultimately earn a credential, a 2-year degree, within 3 years. Unacceptable. Today we're calling for a renewed effort to align expectations between the systems so that we can match student aspiration with student preparation. Now, there are some good news stories here. We have Tennessee with us, Mike Krause, today, and that represents what we think is a compelling example of what can be achieved when systems work together to set common goals, align priorities, and support student success. Working together in Tennessee to meet the Drive to 55 post-secondary attainment goal, the K-12 Department of Education and the Tennessee Higher Education Commission have worked with their community partners to increase the levels of preparation, transition, and success pretty dramatically. And what's been most impressive for me to watch this effort is to see how the Drive to 55 goal has been a unifier for higher education and K-12 in Tennessee. The goal has clearly driven major strategy realignment in the higher ed sector, but it's also been fully embraced and embedded in the K-12 reform agenda. And you'll hear a little bit more about that today. The state's aligned efforts are also paying dividends. Tennessee is now recognized as the state with the greatest growth in K-12 student achievement in the nation, and it's made significant gains in increasing college enrollment. And all that work, I believe, puts Tennessee on track to meet its Drive to 55 goal, which is pretty amazing given how ambitious a goal that was. Now, there are 40 other states in the U.S. that, as I said earlier, that have set post-secondary attainment goals like Tennessee. What we'd like to see is that all of them will make that goal everyone's target and responsibility, not just higher education. North Carolina just modeled this behavior last month when it announced its 2 million by 2030 goal for increasing attainment in the state. All sectors were involved in setting that goal, and all sectors will share the responsibility for meeting it. Seamless transitions. We know that the courses students take in high school are often the most powerful predictor of their future success. In fact, students that are exposed to early post-secondary opportunities while they're in high school, whether that's dual credit, AP, IB, or industry-recognized credentials that allow for college credit to be earned, have a much greater likelihood of enrolling and persisting in college. Unfortunately, fewer than 1/3 of all high school graduates in the U.S. have completed an early post-secondary credit opportunity, and the gaps between Black and Latino students and their white peers are substantial. Indiana is a national leader in providing access to post-secondary credit opportunities in high school. Over the past few years, the state has seen substantial growth in dual credit and advanced placement course enrollment. More than 60% of high school graduates now leave school having participated in one of these opportunities. And over 40% of the graduates that participated in dual credit earned the equivalent of 1 semester of college credit before leaving high school. And while equity gaps still remain, the rates of students earning dual credit have increased by double digits across racial and socioeconomic backgrounds. That's huge progress. And when we've studied this, we think that the outcomes are a direct result of a shared commitment across K-12 and higher education. The state made sure access was broadly available in both general academic and technical education courses. They created significant financial and accountability incentives to expand access to these courses. They removed unnecessary gatekeeping measures that kept people out of these courses. and they required that dual credit courses transfer statewide. All of this was done with an eye toward quality, by the way, since we know as we expand access to dual enrollment, we don't want to see the quality of the instruction diminish. The state was one of the first to require comprehensive quality standards for all the programs. Now, Indiana's commitment to facilitating these transitions also continues. We were really pleased last year to see that the State Commissioner of Higher Education partnered with the K-12 superintendent to form a joint task force on student transitions. They brought leaders in both sectors together. They studied what's working across the country and what their current baselines were, and they came out with a pretty ambitious strategy for closing the preparation gap by working even more collaboratively across the two sectors. Both boards of education adopted that plan by the end of this past calendar year, and now they're beginning to move forward on it. Finally, let me say a word about navigational supports. Far too often, even with adequate academic preparation, students fall off track trying to navigate the maze that exists to get between high school and college. This is especially true for student groups that have been traditionally underserved by higher education. Today, we're calling on states and communities to expand their vision of supports beyond academics to help students traverse these myriad barriers that stand in their path to post-secondary success. This includes financial aid, summer melt, college match, to name a few. First, financial aid. Students are much more likely to enroll and persist in higher education if they can access appropriate financial aid. 90% of high school students, seniors who complete the FAFSA, the Federal Application for Federal Student Aid, attend college directly from high school, compared to just 55% of seniors who do not complete the FAFSA, 90% versus 50%. And yet our national completion rates for the FAFSA are in the low 60s. For many students, they simply don't know about it, they don't know how to access the information, they don't have anyone in their lives who has gone through this that can help them, and those are the ones being left behind with a lever that's so powerful to open this door to higher education. Summer melt. The rate at which students who intend to go to college and do not show up is very, very high. 20, 30, and even in some school districts around the country, 40% of high school graduates that indicated they were going to college in the spring never enroll in the fall, 40%. These are students that, for all intents and purposes, have made it. They've gotten accepted. They've said they're going to go. After they walk across the stage with a high school diploma, they have that next ticket ready to turn in, but somehow they don't matriculate in the fall. We have to find a way to freeze this summer melt. And thirdly, college match. We see a large number of students, especially students of color and low-income students, that select higher education institutions that do not match their academic profile and their potential. They are undershooting. And we know from places like Chicago that when students do attend institutions that match their profile and their potential, they have a much higher likelihood of persistence and success. So let me focus on one last example of a place that's working on this challenge, Louisiana. And not to open any fresh wounds for Mike Krause, who's in the crowd. Okay, all right, I'll correct the record. One of the most hotly contested competitions last year was for the title of the state with the highest FAFSA completion rates. This was playing out over social media, left and right. And the two states that were in the lead were Tennessee and Louisiana. Tennessee had been the leader for a long time, and Louisiana made a really strong effort to compete. And at least when we last calculated, Louisiana narrowly edged out Tennessee for the lead. But honestly, the important point here is both were far ahead of most other states in FAFSA completion rates. According to Mike, Tennessee may be ahead this very day. So we'll go ask others, we'll ask John White if that's true. But importantly, Louisiana's story is one about both policy and practice and a kind of an intentional effort to work across the sectors. In the last school year, the state began requiring financial aid planning as a condition for graduation from high school. It was required. To ensure that the implementation was effective, they began sharing data and completion rates with educators on a regular basis and publicly. They made a big deal of this. They assisted school systems in coordinating outreach events. They participated with a variety of other organizations and advocacy groups to shine a bright light on this topic. It was all over the place. It was in the news. That work and these policy levers that they pulled in Louisiana led to more than a 20 percentage point increase 1 year after the next in FAFSA completion rates. And remember what I said about the 90% versus the 55% of those who complete a FAFSA and their potential to succeed in college. So Louisiana was smart. They looked at the data. They kind of watched what Tennessee had been doing in terms of how to pull policy levers to make this happen, and they made an all-out effort to increase FAFSA completion rates. I think they're going to continue that work, and obviously we want to see if it has results. But this is just evidence that when we put our minds to it, these things are changeable, these problems are solvable. At the end of the day, this is about the 2 million students this spring who will cross that stage, get a high school diploma, celebrate that with their families, as they very well should, but will not transition to a higher education institution, or if they do, will arrive underprepared and won't complete. 2 million students a year in the U.S. don't successfully transition into post-secondary education or training programs. That's a lot of students year after year, a lot of lives that we could be changing. And unfortunately for many of those students, their zip code is often their destiny, and we can't allow that to happen. At the heart of this coalition is a deep commitment to closing the overall preparation gap while focusing like a laser on students from racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds that have been underserved traditionally by our system. And I want to say this is more about just saying that all students should have access to post-secondary opportunities. It's a really important point. Because as Vincent Tinto said, access without support does not equal opportunity. We've got to do more than provide access. It takes intentional, persistent, hands-on work, rolling up our sleeves together across the sectors to close these gaps and change students' lives. Now, we're excited today to have a great agenda for you. We've got two fantastic panels that we're going to hear from shortly. One of students whose lives have been transformed by programs like the ones that I've mentioned. And then following that, a panel of leading educators, system leaders from higher education and K-12 at the state and local level, who will really talk about what it takes to get this done and why this is so important. And we want to put this in front of everyone again so we can realize that there are ways to solve these problems if we put our minds to it. We've got to be reminded from the student perspective of what works, and then we need to really talk to our leaders in the field who are driving change and being honest about what's hard about it. And we hope that after today, we'll all be motivated and inspired as a collective group to go out and make a difference on this agenda and make it one of the top priorities in the land. Not low on the list, at the very top of the list, and it can only be done together. But I'm excited to share an example of a community that has made a difference and that's taken these words to heart in making sure that students have a helping hand to navigate that path from high school to higher education and showing what it can mean when the K-12 school system partners with the college to get this done. So please take a look at the Shark Path program in Miami-Dade.
Make sure you do not request for your transcripts to be sent before you graduate, otherwise they're incomplete because your graduation date's not posted on it. My name is Jennifer Saria, and I'm a pre-college advisor of Miami-Dade College. I work very closely with the high schools by primarily my seniors, which are the 12th graders transitioning into their freshman year of college. So I help and facilitate the process from admissions all the way to orientation.
Jennifer and I mostly get together when she's at Miami Senior High School. She's usually in a table during lunchtime, and I communicate and I ask her questions regarding my college process. I'll be the first ever in my family to go to college, as my parents don't have any experience how to work the college application. I have Jennifer to really guide me, and I really do depend on her.
One of the biggest things for us at the college was really analyzing data and looking at those really humbling completion rates for students who started at different onboarding points. We saw that those 5-year completion rates were really not where we wanted them to be.
In 2011, we had a college-wide commitment to improve student achievement, And we had cross-functional academic and student affairs teams that really review the barriers, and we empower them to design equitable strategies to help students be successful. With that work, we developed the SHARK Path, which is an integrated pathway with academic and student services along the student's path to help them become successful. So they have a pre-college advisor in the high school that helps them through the onboarding process. Once they start college, then they go to an orientation and they're connected with their first-year advisor. The third component of SHARK Path are faculty mentors.
It's important for me that students go to college so that I see them succeed in something, not necessarily has to be like a bachelor's or an associate's, even a certificate. I've seen the benefits. As long as you can prove or show that you have a particular set of skills, even if it's something technical, it can carry you through. I mean, it can work wonders.
Miami-Dade College is quite large. We have like 8 different campuses, but it's one system.
Without Jennifer's help, I think the experience to sign up for college and FAFSA and the whole process will actually be very hard, because without her, I'm not very familiar with the process. So having her by my side, helping me and teaching me how to do the things, it's very useful.
I think for her, it's easy for her to relate to those students that she sees at the high schools. Her story helps her understand you. She's able to understand all the things that are needed to succeed at Miami-Dade College.
I was born and raised in Cuba, but I came when I was 12 years old. And although there was excitement behind that, there was a lot of challenges that came along with that. I had to learn English, I was in a new school system. Even more so after high school, it was just a completely different dynamic.
We've seen with the implementation of SHARK Path an increase in our retention rates, in enrollment, increase in our completion rates, as well as student satisfaction along the path.
I would say we've come a long way from 10, 14 years ago, now having something more structured.
We talk about students being college ready, but it's important for institutions to be student ready. So at Miami-Dade College, that means having interventions and equitable services for students to be successful.
So it is doable. We're very pleased that after this panel, we'll be hearing from Eduardo Padron, who's the president of Miami-Dade College and one of the architects, or the architect of this program. So thank you for taking a minute to look at a very successful program. So I'm very, very pleased today to be joined by a friend and colleague who has lived by and fought for the values we're here to discuss for his whole career. John King is president and CEO of the Education Trust, one of the highest impact organizations in the country fighting for educational equity for our young people. I have long admired John's commitment to high expectations, both when it comes to students and to educators. And he's a fierce advocate, I think, for expanding opportunities for our young people and removing any barriers that stand in the way. He's also one of the most thoughtful and passionate leaders that I know, and I'm really pleased that you're here to join us today. John and I first met when he was superintendent for education for the state of New York. He then came to the U.S. Department of Education, where he and I both worked. And soon he was appointed by President Obama as the Secretary of Education for the land. But John started his career in the classroom, working with students to help them realize their dreams. So it's only fitting then that John's here today to engage in a conversation with students about the importance of supporting these transitions from high school into the post-secondary. He'll be joined on stage by 4 impressive students to talk about their journeys to and through higher education. Each of these students has participated in a local program here in the district outside of Washington, D.C., called Advancing Collegiate Excellence and Success, ACES, in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's a partnership between the Montgomery County K-12 school system, Montgomery College, the community college, and the Universities of Maryland at Shady Grove, which is a part of the University of Maryland system. And like SHARK Path, we think it's an innovative program that's taking to heart this notion that you really need to lock arms across sectors to support student transitions. So with that, I will turn it over to John. Welcome, John, and welcome to our students.
Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to join Matt and celebrate the launch of Level Up, thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with a group of students, particularly since they are participants in a program in Montgomery County where my kids go to school. So I know I'm not supposed to have a favorite, but really is my favorite school system in America. I hope in this conversation that we can remind ourselves of the difference that support makes at every level of the system. Right? All of us are here, all of us are sitting here because somebody helped us along the way at a critical transition point. For me, as many of you know me know, both my parents passed away when I was a kid in elementary school. And if not for Mr. Osterwile, my teacher in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I wouldn't be here today. But I also, as a kid, because I had gone through trauma, got in trouble a lot in high school and got kicked out of high school. And I wouldn't be here today if not for a school counselor and a set of teachers who convinced me at my new school that I still had the potential to be successful and go on to college. And the truth is, I also wouldn't be here today if not for folks at my college who convinced me that was a place that I belonged, because there were times when I felt like I didn't belong, like maybe I wasn't in the right place. Like maybe someday someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, we made a mistake, you're not supposed to be here. But I had mentors at the Public Service Center at my college who made school a place where I knew I could be successful and thrive. All those people who provided support at the right moment are the reason I'm here today and the reason I've had the opportunities that I have. And what you're going to hear from these students is about the supports that made a difference for them. So I'm going to introduce the students in a moment, but I'm going to ask you to turn to a neighbor. This is the teacher and me. Turn to a neighbor, ideally not someone you came with and already know. Turn to a neighbor and just share for 30 seconds who's a person who made a difference for you in the transition from high school to college or your success in college. So you each have 30 seconds. I'm going to time you. So start now.
There's two.
So I'd say my ACES coach in high school definitely made the impact in me. And then because of the ACES coach, she actually referred me to professors I could take. And then with those professors at Montgomery College, I never really made like a connection with a professor or teacher, even in like my time in high school. I never thought that they really knew me or understood me. And it wasn't until ACES who I was able to sit down with someone, and whenever they were always available for me. It'll help me with education stuff and also even with my own personal issues that I had going on at the time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think about my high school counselor. So like I said, I got kicked out of high school. I went to a new school, and I just thought, like, my life was over because I'd gotten kicked out, and I thought, who's gonna see possibility in me, African American, Latino, in trouble in school, kicked out of school, and I had a counselor who was so certain that I could put my life back together, and her certainty helped me be certain, right? Like sometimes I think you need someone who has so much confidence in you, even more confidence than you have in yourself, to keep pushing you.
No, yeah, definitely. And in high school, I grew up working 3 part-time jobs, and I would always, when I had break, I would help out my father with, I was doing construction at like 14, 15, and from that I grew as an individual, and then ACES was there to help guide me and give me more options on what to do with, like, because I already knew I was a hard worker. Now they just wanted me to focus on one thing and think ahead instead of just thinking of what the next thing.
Well, I hope you're going to share that with these folks, right?
I feel like my mic is bored.
All right, if you can hear the sound of my voice, clap once. If you can hear the sound of my voice, clap 2 times. You can hear the sound of my voice, clap 3 times real fast. All right. Let me introduce our student panelists. So we have Jorge Torres, who is at University of Maryland, College Park, majoring in biological sciences. We have Emily Samuels, who is a senior at University of Maryland, College Park, also in biological sciences. We have Julie Resendiz.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. A junior at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, majoring in social work. And we have Rifa Ariella, second-year student at Montgomery College, focused on communications. So let me start with this question. I'd love for each of you to share what were some of the things you were worried about in high school, and how did ACES help you make the transition from high school to college? What role did ACES play? And why don't we'll just go right down the line. We'll start with you, Jorge.
So I would definitely say that growing up here in the United States, my parents they always knew I was going to be able to go to college, and I knew I had the potential within me. But just the application process was a bit difficult at the time. And I still had my parents' support. It just they weren't too familiar with the education system here. And I feel that ACES was there to help guide me with the application process. We had workshops where the counselors from Montgomery College, where I was applying, would go to my high school and help me with the actual process. So I actually felt that I had a connection with someone who was already there. And also, in addition, I would definitely say that in the interviewing process, or even speaking with someone that from the college, ACES had workshops which helped me with interviewing skills, something that you could Google, but having a program where was there help you practice interviewing with people, and just communication skills was very crucial.
Excellent, thanks. Rita?
Yeah, so for me, kind of the same thing. My parents are coming from developing countries, so they don't know much about the American education system. So it was hard having that support at home, being that I only have one older sibling, which he didn't really plan on taking or going the college route, which I forced him to. He's in school. But yeah, so being that they didn't know much about the application process or even financial aid, and another thing to add is that I'm a DACA recipient, so I didn't know what I could qualify for or what I couldn't qualify for. So ACES was really that backbone in letting me know what to do next, whether it was with the financial aspect or just applications with school, getting the in-state tuition through the DREAM Act. And yeah, with the workshops as well, they always let us know what, they got us not only college ready, but career ready, how to write emails, how to dress too. So yeah, I think that they really were helpful in not only college readiness, but career readiness, and that transition was really smooth because of them.
Excellent. Julie?
So for me, just like I think what a lot of us have in common is that we all have parents that did not go to college. For me, I didn't really think that college was an option. I thought I was going to graduate from high school and go work some type of job, but ACES really helped me realize that I had the potential to go to college, that it was an option. They helped me apply for FAFSA. And then they also helped me get internships so I could see, what exactly it was that I wanted to do in the future.
Yeah, like my peers mentioned, my parents didn't go to college either, and I'm the oldest, so I'm the first one to go. ACES was really essential in helping me make those connections with Montgomery College, and they had an ACES coach there that I was able to talk to and meet with separately about the application process, making sure I had the FAFSA, taxes information, getting my transcripts in on time, for my AP credit classes. And just having that connection of ACES coach in high school and at MC really helped me with that smooth transition, and knowing that I would have financial aid available for me to pay for college.
Excellent. Let's turn maybe to the experience at college, and we'll start with you, Rifa. What kinds of supports did ACES provide that have helped you so far to be successful in college?
Right. So so there is a coach at every campus of MC, so Rockville, Germantown, and Tacoma Park. So I think she said that we have a coach at the high school level, and then we have a coach at the college level. So it wasn't like we were ever missing anybody, if that makes sense. We knew that we were going from one place, being one-on-one with somebody and getting that one-on-one help, to the second place with one-on-one help. So once I was at college, those one-on-one meetings with my ACES coach at the campus were really important, because at first it's much more students that they deal with in high school, right? So once it becomes a smaller group in college, it's much easier to be one-on-one and know exactly our situation. If that makes sense, there's no confusion with the students or anything like that. So yeah, so once at college, whether it was signing up for classes, which I had no clue on how to do, or just even like using Rate My Professor and finding out like who's the perfect professor. We got advising for pretty much most of the steps that we need to how to have a successful semester, and even if it's like tutoring, if we felt like we needed a tutor for a class, like they have list of tutors. And one of the bigger things was a list of private scholarships for me, because as you guys know, I can't, as a DACA recipient, federal aid is something that I can't get. So that list of private scholarships, that very huge list, I applied to most that I think I could have. And yeah, I think that they provide the resources that we need when we feel like we don't need them, or when we feel like we can't have them.
Yeah, thank you. You should know that there are a number of people in this room who are working to try to change the law so that that you are eligible for federal aid, right?
Yes,
yes, and we all think that that is important.
Right.
So, let me ask a follow-up question, and anyone can answer. What makes for a good coach? Some of the folks here run programs where coaching college students is part of what they do. What makes a coach effective or successful in helping support college students?
I'll go. I guess I'll say that with the ACEs, or with the coaches in general, I think that it's good to go like, when talking to a student, that understand that there's life beyond education in school. I think that's really important. Just being aware that we're all coming from different backgrounds and stuff is really important, because I think that a lot of the times with my past educators in high school and how they would talk to us would kind of like make it seem that we will all be coming from the same level, considering we were all, whether it was in the same grades or the same, age group. But when they tell me that they know that there is life beyond school, and that they know that we're going to be maintaining jobs, we might have siblings that we're taking care of, or more responsibilities beyond school, I think it's really comforting. To know that there's life beyond school.
Yeah. Julie, given that you're studying social work, what would you add to that? What's important? What's important in the relationship building?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, what was really helpful for me was the fact that they helped me plan out, these are the classes that you need to take in order to graduate in 2 years, in order to graduate on time and kind of keep moving on towards your long-term goal. But they were also serving not just like guiding me through my educational pathway, but they also serve as a counselor. So if I was stressed with a certain class, I could go in and talk to them about that. If there was something that was maybe affecting my ability to kind of do well in school, I could feel free to go in and talk to them about that. Or if there were certain resources that I needed, I mean, they even had like snacks in their office. If you're stressed, come eat snacks, So it was a lot of not just educational support, but also, I guess, you could say like counseling and emotional support as well, which was very helpful for all of us. Yes.
Oh, and something I wanted to add on. She mentioned how they were always there for us. Even whether it was in terms of school or even personal issues, I always felt that I had a strong connection with my coaches, which are in any campus. So even during my time at MC, I knew I could still visit the next stage and go to universities at Shady Grove, and I knew there was going to be an ACES coach there who already knew who I was, and who have already, contacted, and we've had like good conversations with. And, even in my time in high school, I found myself during lunch just eating lunch with my ACES coach. A lot of the ACES students would, just hang out together and even just be friends with our coaches, and that was definitely a good thing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Emily, let me ask you to talk about the career part of the support. How is ACES helping you think about your career plan? What do you want to do next?
At MC, I was like my coach, Mrs. Sanchez. She was like a mentor for me, and she would always look out for opportunities, like internships that would benefit me in my career path in biological sciences. And she recommended that I would apply to an internship that was like for a year and a half at the J. Craig Venture Institute, and they have a campus in Rockville and in California. And they focus in like biotech research, infectious diseases, and that like sparked an interest in me that I didn't consider before, because I was always considering like dental school, but now I'm thinking of the possibility of maybe graduate school as well. And from that research experience that I got in that internship that was recommended for me from my ACES coach, I was able to build a foundation for my resume and be able to get other internships like I did over the summer with NIH at the Johns Hopkins campus, working on like cardiovascular diseases. And then currently now I have an internship during the semester with NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, working on like protein engineering. So it's just exploring my interest there, and I'm still like undecided, but I'm like, I know that I want to like still pursue like a career in STEM, and I could possibly merge the two and do like something related to dental research that like advances that kind of field. So I thank like ACES for being there for me, like in the first steps that like help lead through my path. Yeah.
Great.
And then if I might add, they really introduced us to these careers really, really early on. Like I remember in the high school levels when we had the summer programs, they would hold career fairs, and this is actually the place that I realized is what I want to do is what I'm doing right now. So I think that it's like really important to start early, if that makes sense. And I think that because they introduced us to all these careers and had this huge fair, I remember it was held at Shady Grove, and there was a bunch of tables and a bunch of reps, you know, getting excited about their programs and what they in the field they work in. So when I see people excited about their jobs, it made me want to, you know, pursue that. So yeah, I would say that was a big help.
So what's your plan? What do you want to do after school?
So I am going towards my bachelor's degree in communications. I don't have a specific career that I want to do yet, but I'm really starting to get into like the media aspect of communications. And they had at the career fair a table, I forget the name of the company, but it was a company, and they were advertising broadcast journalism and all that, and I got really interested in that. So I was like, I think communications. General communication first, because I don't specifically know yet, but yes, that.
Good. Well, this is a good place to be hanging out.
Yeah. I'm their go-to girl now. They're like, communications? All right, she's there.
Julie, how about for you?
For me, so since I'm in the social work program now, I want to go on to grad school and enroll in the dual master's program for social work and public health. In the future, I hope to hopefully one day have my own nonprofit organization, and I also want to get into healthcare a little bit. So I want to, you know, do research and kind of like address the barriers that people in poverty face when trying to access healthcare. So that's really what I'm looking to do in the future.
Excellent. And how has ACES been helpful in thinking about career planning, and what kinds of career-focused opportunities have you had?
So they really do stress, again, like volunteering and internship opportunities. I've done so much this past year, my first year at the university at Shady Grove. I've done so much. Thankful, like they've helped me, I guess, edit my resume, my cover letter for every single program that I've applied to. And so, you know, the last meeting that I had with my ACES coach, she was like, you have so much experience on your resume now, it just doesn't fit. Like, we have to kind of look at, you know, what's relevant to each opportunity. And so I'm grateful that they kind of helped me practice through mock interviewing and getting prepared with certain career readiness skills to really be able to get these opportunities.
Excellent. Jorge?
So for ACES, we did have a specific workshop where we had young professionals in the fields that we were interested in. At least for us, the students interested in the healthcare field, we had students who were already applying for medical school, students who first-year medical students or dental school students, and they were there, and we had interviewing skills workshops with them, and then they gave us their own perspective on the school and then on the education pathway, and because of that, that really solidified my desire to go to dental school, so I do plan on applying soon. And also because of ACES, I actually was given the opportunity to job shadow a local dentist who was actually an alumni from Montgomery College. And then through that, I'm very thankful. I impressed her, and then she gave me a job internship, and then now I'm there working.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so one thing people could take away is that you guys have had these great supports. You are all headed towards great careers. And we could all leave and say, great, everything's all set.
Right.
But actually, we know there are a lot of students who aren't getting these opportunities. So I want to turn the conversation there. Think about some of your peers in high school who didn't end up going on to college or a good job. What was missing for them?
I think I could say that the resources that we got when we were accepted into the program, we know that a lot of our peers, if they didn't know about the program, or probably just weren't even there for the recruitment day that they had, if they missed that chance, they were missing that extra support and honestly where to start. Like a lot of my friends that didn't end up wanting to continue going to school didn't know where to start in applying for school or applying for federal aid. But what I think is really important, and I don't think some of the ACES coaches realize, is that when we get to learn about these resources as students, we can pass that on to others. And I've honestly became like a miniature advisor, literally. Like I'm 4'11", I'm very miniature. And I think that it's really cool because like I can pass this on to my sister who doesn't really know, and she's not in the ACES program or something. And yeah, that knowledge that we have, even though we see that lack of knowledge in our peers about higher education and continuing education after high school, it's comforting to know that we can pass that knowledge around. But yeah, so some of the resources they were missing for sure is that what we were getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that the ACES really made sure to keep in their mind was the language barrier. I know during my time in high school, you know, even if there were meetings with school counselors and parents, there was sometimes a lack of someone there to translate for parents who didn't really understand the language as well. So ACES, every time we had a meeting, there's always someone there to translate, or even a lot of our counselors could speak Spanish to my parents. So that was definitely something that really hit home. Because again, my parents, they do want to be involved. It's just that that language barrier is also a big issue. And again, like ACES made it easy just to communicate with, you know, high school to MC to University of Shady Grove.
Mm-hmm. Julie, what would you say if your high school principal was sitting here and wanted advice about how to better support students through their transition? What would you tell them?
I think a lot of the times what I've noticed is that my peers who haven't been in the ACES program, like some of them have stayed for a long time at the community college level, or they really don't know, you know, I'm done, I got my associates in like general studies and I just don't know what I should do next. I think a lot of the times what we really need to do is kind of like Rifa said, we have to start at the beginning. So it's really important to get this started during the high school, like junior, senior level. And I think that these students really missed out not being a part of this program because it doesn't only affect you in high school, but it's affecting you all the way through. So even though I'm not going to be in the ACES program when I'm in grad school, because I already graduated from undergrad, it has affected me all the way through the experiences and all the support and all the preparing that I've gotten. So I think that's really something that needs to be stressed. And then again, she mentioned knowledge. I feel like, you know, all the knowledge that they've passed on to me in terms of, you know, public speaking, getting my resume to look professional. I think, you know, I have friends that they're not in this program, and so I'm like, you know, let me help you apply for this opportunity because it's important to pass on what people have given to you.
Mm-hmm. Emily, what would you add?
I think similar to what they've said, I remember in high school we had a college and career center, like with the counselors separated there, and so I would, my peers would go there, but I feel like making it more available to all students, because I know like select students that were like maybe up higher up in the class, they were the ones that got invited to meet with her and like learn about these scholarship opportunities, but making it more accessible to all students, saying these are the scholarship opportunities that are available to you, you should apply, because there's a lot for high school seniors. And I think that's what's a major barrier like in high school, because originally I was planning to go to a four-year school like UMBC or College Park right after, but then when it came down to it, it was all like financial aid. Right. And ACES was something that I could like lean back on, and I knew I had that support there for me. So I feel like making that accessible to students, and then once they get to Montgomery College, like what Julie said, most students, they don't know like what classes to take for the degree. Maybe they're delayed, maybe take 3 or 4 years to get an associate's, because they're either like getting like different information from different college counselors saying like you should take this class or like this class, and like it's helpful for your degree but it's not required. So then I feel like that's something that delayed some of my peers that I noticed that they would either like be at Montgomery College for 3 years, and then once they get their degree, or they want to leave soon so they don't get their degree and try to transfer to a 4-year school, they don't know, oh, I don't have all the classes, I don't know what's transferring over, how do I apply to like a 4-year school from the community college level, like feeling lost. I remember like one of my friends asking me like to help her come over and like see her application like to transfer over and see if she had all the information that she needed for like transfer access programs like at College Park. So I feel like having like a counselor, the counselors at the community college level would be helpful if they all had like consistent information that they would share to their students. So then we don't get lost in that like 4-year, like 2-year, like long length of community college time. So yeah.
Thank you. I mean, that's such an important point for folks here, and I know there are many folks in this room think about the work that Mike's doing in Tennessee, but helping to think about how do you make sure there are smooth transitions for students from community college to 4 years, and how do you make sure students are getting that good advice about course selection. Let me ask you to build on that point. Anyone can weigh in. What are some of the things that get in the way for students in college? Because we know at Montgomery College there are a lot of great success stories like yours, but there are also a lot of students who don't finish. And particularly first generation students, particularly students of color, particularly students whose families have limited economic means. So talk about what are some of the things that get in the way for students that cause them not to finish?
At least for me, I'm also a DACA student, so even trying to figure out how to pay for school was also difficult. But because of ACES, I'm very thankful and fortunate to be given a full ride to my current school, and because of that, before that full ride, I was working 3 part-time jobs. I was working construction with my father, and it was getting in the way. But because of ACES and their financial help, I was able to focus more on school. I'm actually doing pretty well in school right now. I'm very thankful every day. I'm able to meet with my donor who actually gave me the scholarship, so I do feel that ACES has helped me. But that, at least for me, my biggest issue was how to pay for school, and I feel that it's the same issue with a lot of students that I've met, and even like whenever I speak about ACES, I always hear, oh, how can I apply for the program, how I can get in, but unfortunately it's starting back from like the pathway back in high school.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what he said a little bit, because of those barriers and those burdens that arise with our personal life, I think that we tend to become disorganized once we get into the college level, and something that ACES stresses and that I found ended up being really important was that academic plan and using that transfer advising sheet and using those transfer agreements that we get with the community college level to the 4-year university. A lot of people don't know about that, actually. Like, I know I have peers in my at MC right now that I'm like, oh, like they need help with something, or like they don't know what to sign up for next semester. I'm like, oh, okay, like where's your transfer advising sheet, or where's your academic plan? And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go from the beginning. And so, yeah, I think that it's really important. Like, it's really easy to get disorganized and really easy to get lost because of other worries, such as we had the same problem like with the financial aspect of DACA. So, yeah, just being on track and getting the plan together.
Yeah. Julie, I asked what you would advise your high school principal. I'd be curious if we had the Montgomery College president here or trustees here, what would you say students need in order for a larger percentage of students not just to start school but finish?
I think definitely, just like my peers mentioned, financial support is really a big one. I think someone can have definitely the drive and the potential to pursue higher education, but if they don't have the economic support that they need, it can be really discouraging for them. When I was in ACES in high school, my ACES coach helped me apply for a scholarship at Montgomery College, which was the Board of Trustees scholarship, and it was a full ride. So thankfully I got it because of their help, but I think there are a lot of students out there that they don't really know about the opportunities out there, or there are certain barriers that kind of prevent them from being able to apply to those type of opportunities. So financial need is definitely a big one.
Let me follow up on that. There are some folks who say the solution to that is make tuition free in community colleges. There are other people who say tuition is good, a good start, but students need more because the cost of college is about more than tuition. How do you think about that? What are some of the ways that financial need gets in the way for students?
I think, oh, that's a hard question. Like, of course, like tuition free, that's amazing, you know. But it is true, you know, if you might have your full tuition paid, but if you're not, you know, if you're not eating well, if you're not eating a balanced diet, how are you going to be able to concentrate in school? If you're not getting your basic necessities, you know, you're going to be worrying about that and not about trying to get an education. So I think it's a little bit of both, in my opinion. Especially like, you know, with first generation college students, yeah, it's a little bit of both. That's a tough question.
Yeah. No, but a lot of us are grappling with this question,
Yeah.
and I think the country really is, and how to think about this, because we know food insecurity, housing insecurity are big issues for all college students, but particularly on community college campuses. We know that there's the cost of books and fees. There's the problem that, you know, maybe you have everything covered and then the car breaks down, or somebody, you know, something goes wrong for a family member and you have to loan them money, and now you're not able to keep up. And so we're all, I think, struggling with what's the right way for us to support students to be successful. Emily, other observations about what gets in the way for students in particular? You know, you're in biological sciences. One of the challenges we have as a country is in the STEM fields, we see fewer students of color. We see fewer female students. We see fewer female students of color, right? What are some of the things that get in the way for students?
I feel like the rigorous coursework in like the first year of like MC, just like the chemistry, the like biology, like taking all those classes together with labs, it like fills up your week, like Monday through Friday all day. And then it can get intense, and like sometimes it can discourage students that are like coming to college saying like, oh, I'm gonna go to medical school, this is what I wanna do, I wanna be a doctor. But then once they like face that first year of those classes, they feel discouraged, like I can't do it anymore. So like I feel like I always went to my ACES coach and I would tell her like I'm struggling with this or something in classes, and she would always motivate me to keep pushing that I can. And like with my family, like none of them are like been to college or like are familiar with the STEM field. So like when I come home and then try to like explain like what kind of things I'm doing in class is kind of hard, like explaining in a different way. So that can also be discouraging because not knowing how to like share like the joy of like what you're learning with your family because they're not sure what you mean. Also, I guess just having like a mentor, someone that's older, like to like advise you and say, okay, these are the suggestions I have for you to be successful in these hardcore like science classes, math and classes, like especially engineering students, I noticed as well. And I've done that for my sister, and now she's following a similar pathway, and she's interested in going into medical school. So I feel like it's having a mentor, someone that's like with you, saying that you can do it, like, and motivating you, because otherwise you just want to like switch and do something that's not as hard. Yeah.
And I think something that isn't talked about that I personally struggle with this past school year is mental health. Like, our mental health really gets affected with all these, you know, all the pressure that we have as a student and even beyond being a student, like the things that happen at home. So some days, like, it was like really hard to get up and go to school. And I think that we should talk about it more, because when I brought up the problem to my ACES coach, and I felt like, you know, I started having a lot more anxiety, and it was getting harder to, you know, talk and get up and go to school. They took it really seriously, and I think that's really important for a lot of people. And being in a foreign household, you know, sometimes that gets brushed off, like mental health isn't a real thing to them. So I think it's really important that we start recognizing that that's a real thing, and students really get affected by it.
Absolutely. I think all the evidence nationally is that anxiety and depression are huge issues in high school and college, and too often folks aren't getting the support and services they need. Let me ask you about careers. There are folks who graduate from community college or even from four-year colleges and then don't exactly know what to do and aren't able to successfully transition to careers. You all talked about the supports you're getting through ACES. What do you see with your peers? What supports are they getting or not getting around career transitions? What else should be in place for other students?
At least for when I was in ACES, I made sure we made sure to schedule an appointment where I sat down and I told them my career goals, and then I actually had to fill out a form saying my goals and long-term and short-term, and the grades I was expected to get, and the educational pathway and schools that I was interested in. And then they made sure to remind me to, Google the counselors of the schools you want to go to, figure out the counselors at the dental school or medical school, and also 3 other options of other interests that you might be willing to do, like different careers. And we also made sure to take different career tests, which would help us get an idea of where we wanted to go. And I feel like if I were to talk to someone else who was in the program, they've never heard of a career test, or they've never Googled the counselors at the different schools, or even figured out at least for my situation, do they even take DAGA students? Because it can get a little difficult at times, but just having an ACES coach is sitting there telling you to do this and finding the resources for yourself, and was definitely helpful.
I would also like to add that doing job searching with somebody that's already job searched before. Like, I did that with my ACES coach, and there are some jobs that we don't know exist. There's some titles that we don't know that that's an occupation. So I think it's really cool that we look in that. We plug in whether you can filter on Indeed. I did it with my ACES coach. What jobs you can get with the communications degree, what jobs you can get with the education degree, and know that it's not only elementary ed equals you're going to be a teacher, or something like that, and that it goes beyond the realm of what you might think. It goes outside of the box. So yeah, I think it's really important that we start that job searching early and do it with somebody that's familiar with it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think what they really help you do is kind of narrow down what exactly your interests are in. So like for me, for social work, you can do so many things. You can be a school social worker. You can work in the jails. You can do private practice. There are so many things that you can do with this degree. So they help me narrow that down and kind of see, making sure that I get experience in those kind of areas that I'm interested in. And they also help you have different opportunities to network. So making sure that you're connecting with people in your community for the future, that way you're prepared, that you have professional relationships with these people. And if in the future you might want to reach out to them, they show you, the proper etiquette and how to be professional with them. Yeah.
Excellent. Emily, what would you add?
I agree with Julie in that, making sure that we make those connections and networking while we're still at undergrad level, and knowing what's available in the community for us, for jobs, and what Jorge and Rifa mentioned before about making sure we have our resume and cover letter ready, because some students, by the time they graduate, they probably don't have that set, so then they're scrambling trying to remember all of the experience that they've had and put on a resume to be able to share to employers. So I feel those two are very important, knowing the networking and the opportunities out there, as well as making sure that you have your application set, the resume and all that information that they need to see that makes you a good applicant.
Excellent. Yeah. I could have this conversation all day.
Right.
Yeah. I've so enjoyed learning from all of you, but I know we are coming to the end of our time. Yeah. Let me ask you each in a sentence, if you have one more piece of advice, something we didn't cover, something we didn't talk about, to a room of people who are trying to help more students be successful in the transition from high school to college and then to succeed in college, what's that one additional point you would want all these folks to take away? You can take a moment to think about that. All right, who wants to go first?
I'm not quite there yet. Hold on. Anybody else ready? No.
I mean, one sentence, that's hard.
Yeah, I know,
You
right?
could have two. You could have two sentences. That'd be all right. But just one thing that we haven't yet talked on or talked about or touched on enough that you want to make sure people take away as they think about the supports that students need.
For me, I guess it's really just being there for the student. And it's like not thinking that something that they could go through is impossible or an adversity they could face is impossible. I think it's really important that really anything could happen and to be optimistic to the obstacles and the struggles that we have to hurdle over as students. And that it can be intimidating. It can be, you know, this is not two sentences. Just thought about that. But yeah, just really being there for the student mentally, emotionally, and yeah, that would be my last point.
Yeah, I'd say maybe for when the counselors or the teachers, professors talk to the students, you know, talk to them and, you know, make sure that, like, you know, that you believe in them more than that. Make sure that you believe in them, because a lot of the times it's my coaches would believe in me more than what I thought I could do. So, you know, that really helped me build more self-confidence and then really realize that the great potential that we all have as students, and especially from, you know, coming from immigrant families and all the great potential, and even helping serve the communities here in Maryland or in DC.
Excellent.
I think something that's really important is, I guess, having coaches that are from different backgrounds, because as you can see, like, a lot of us are minorities, so being able to be culturally competent is really important. And then also for the coach to be able to get on the student's level, so put themselves in the student's shoes in terms of their situation and what they're going through.
Excellent.
For me, I would say for coaches to support the students and get to know their story and like what they're interested in after college, as well as like looking out for those opportunities that could benefit the student in the future.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, please join me in thanking this amazing panel of students.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Morning. I'm Ryan Reyna, Director of Postsecondary Transitions at Education Strategy Group, and I'm going to ask my other panelists to come up now. And again, thank you, students and John, for your comments this morning. They were inspiring, and we appreciate them. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the partner organizations in the Level Up Coalition for their commitment to this work. Advanced CTE, Alliance for Excellent Education, Association of Community College Trustees, Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas, Center for American Progress, Chiefs for Change, Council of Chief State School Officers, Complete College America, Data Quality Campaign, Education Commission of the States, Foundation for Excellence in Education, National Association of System Heads, National College Access Network, New America, State Higher Education Executive Officers Association, and the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. I'd like to ask that representatives of those organizations, if you wouldn't mind, stand up for a moment to be recognized, and thank you for your participation in this great effort. And we have a lot watching online as well. I'd also like to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for their generous support of the Level Up Coalition. We just heard powerful stories about the role that innovative programs can play in helping shape students' lives. In our next panel, moderated by Carissa Miller, Executive Director of CCSSO, we will hear from state, district, and institutional leaders as they talk about their work to collaboratively build stronger bridges between high school and post-secondary education and training. Joining Carissa on the stage is Pedro Rivera, the Pennsylvania Secretary of Education, Mike Kraus, Executive Director of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, Next to Mike is Sonia Santelises, CEO of Baltimore City Schools. And finally, at the end, Eduardo Padron, who you saw momentarily in our video earlier, president of Miami-Dade College. Just a reminder for folks in the audience and those watching online, we are monitoring Twitter using the hashtag #LevelUpForStudents, so please submit any questions that you may have for this panel, as we'll have a little bit of time at the end to respond to those. So with that, Carissa, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you again for your support of this coalition.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning to all of you, and I'm so honored to be here with my esteemed colleagues on this panel. I have to say it's always a hard act to follow students, so we have no small task in front of us. They were fabulous. I think this panel, when I was thinking about, we have creative names for what this panel is, but as I think about the report that's coming out today and our support of this, it's really the role of systems and system leaders, and we're going to highlight some successes from these places, but it's also about finding better ways in which we as systems and system leaders really transcend for students across, I think what Matt called our respective lanes that we continue to stay in, and how we blur those lines to make sure that we're not doing that. From my vantage point as the executive director of CCSSO, I've seen how states are leading to create these kinds of effective partnerships. A lot of those examples outlined in the report that will be released. I also see it in one of our really important pieces of work that we do now, which is our New Skills for Youth program with our partners from ESG and Advanced CTE. It's a project that's supported by JPMorgan Chase. And in that project, there's 10 states with chiefs and post-secondary leaders thinking about how the transitions into post-secondary education are seamless for young people. And that transcends a variety of ways in which young people enter into our career pathways. The post-secondary partners include industry leaders, so that they can have linkages even down into middle school as we think about how we support that. And the indicators in that particular project are indicators that I think are important, and we've seen in some of the videos, the dual credit attainment, post-secondary enrollment, and actual employment for students, and how we make that more of a continuum rather than an or kind of focus. But there's still really a long way for us to go to achieve educational equity for all kids, that all those pathways are available for all kids. And this is what is really important in our work at CCSSO with our state chiefs and our relationships with our post-secondary partners and with employers. All of us have to be working to close those achievement gaps that Matt outlined so importantly in the first part of this. And so I'm going to kick this off. I'm going to ask our partners here, I'm going to ask specific questions about each of their programs and the places that they're working. But I want to highlight something in the report itself. If you can see on page 11 and 12, there's a key question about system leaders. And the question is, what will it take to measurably improve outcomes? And there are 3 things that are outlined in that. And it's mutually commit to student success. It's having a common agenda or united resolution across all these systems. The second one is formal collaboration, which Tennessee has highlighted. I'm going to ask Mike to talk a little bit about that. And ensuring sustainability, that it's not just one leader, one system leader, one set of people, but it's a group of people who are going to lead this even beyond the future. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But Eduardo, I want to start with you. We saw that wonderful video of Shark Path, which I love that name, by the way. It makes a lot of sense. But talk to us about what inspired you to make this a priority and what it took to get that in place. And you're seeing some early successes. I saw in the video the 7% increase in graduation for the kids who've gone through Shark Path. So, please.
Well, just to make sure, the shark is the mascot of the school. That's why it's a Shark Path.
It's very innovative, that. So.
Let me put it in the context of that program, because that specifically relates mostly to the advisement process for students. And to me, it's important to recognize that the approach to this matter that we're discussing here has to be a holistic approach. I cannot be just one aspect of it, because otherwise the job is never done. And I feel that part of what we need to do is create a culture of success and achievement that permeates the system, that permeates the college, but permeates the high school. And that's when you can implement these things. And also, it's not the work of one person. It takes a team. It takes people who are really committed. This is not really, as I was talking to someone before, it's not really rocket science, but it's difficult work that takes all the partners working together with the same sense of purpose and making sure that the hearts and the passion get into play. And so what we decided years back is that for us to really be successful, we needed to really develop the relationship with each of the high schools in our area. Our system is, I think, now the fourth or the third largest in the nation. We have a lot of high schools to deal with. Of course, we're a very large institution too, but a lot of territory to cover. And we decided that we needed to start really very, very early, and really even before high school. But I'm just going to talk about the high school and what we do. And that is, we decided that we needed to have our advisors in the high school well before the students get to us. So the pre-college advisors, as we call them, are individuals who have really been trained and have the appropriate disposition to be able to work with the students and be able to bring the college resources to the high school. That requires a very significant close relationship with the principal of the school. And while we work and have a great relationship at the district level, what it really matters is right at the high school, where the principal feels a more direct responsibility for the success of the students. And we work with the counselors and not only with the students, and this is important for me to emphasize because most of the emphasis has been the students. A great part of the success of the students is how well aligned the curriculum is. If the curriculum in the high school, especially for math and English, which are the two major issues that students face when they come to college, is not aligned with the curriculum at the college level, we have a problem. So one of the things we have ensured we do is have constant communication between the faculties. We call it faculty-to-faculty workshops, where the faculty in mathematics meet with the faculty in the high school and look at the curriculum, are constantly trying to make sure that the curriculum is aligned. So when the student comes to us, there is a seamless transition into the courses that they're going to have to start taking us. Because as we all know, for example, mathematics is the major roadblock for the students. That's what really makes them most of the time drop out and not continue. So that works very well. But also, there are a lot of activities that I think is important to undertake, a constant connection with the school in bringing them to the college, several visits during the year for all of the high schools. And one of the things that we have also introduced that is very successful is that we take several of the students who come from a specific high school, who graduated the year before and are now college students. They become the ambassadors. And they are the ones who assist the pre-college advisor in the high school. They go to the high school and work with the students who are graduating seniors and even the 11th graders in really peer-to-peer, trying to talk about college, share their experience, etc. And this is probably more effective than anything else that we do, because students tend to listen a lot to their own peers. And that has been extremely successful, providing the students a pathway, an academic pathway, so they know what is expected of them. Providing financial aid workshops where the parents are involved, right in the high school. It's a number of things. And we're talking about FAFSA, and nobody said it, but frankly, it is a tough job to fill out that FAFSA. You know, almost requires a PhD to be able to understand that application. So no wonder so many schools are so many kids are so frustrated with that process and start the application and then leave it halfway because they're not able to do it. And I hope that someday, and I know the prior administration tried very hard to simplify FAFSA, but we need to continue that effort because it doesn't make any sense. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that all that is important, no question about it. But we need to also remember that we have two issues that we need to deal with, and that is the mindset, especially of families. If we don't work with the families, we're wasting half of the resources. We have many families who still feel that we live in a country today where they can access jobs that no longer exist and jobs that are disappearing every day. And they feel that the kids do not need to go to college because the experience that they had was that, as recent as 40, 50 years ago, let's face it, most Americans with relatively little education could go into factories and offices doing repetitive tasks, manual work, earn a great wage, stay in a job for 30 years, and retire with a good pension, and become middle class. That is no longer possible today for most Americans. And they need to understand the families need to be educated, especially low-income families, families who really come from underserved backgrounds, that unless those kids are exposed to a post-secondary credential of value that allows them to access the new jobs that are being created, they're going to stay in a cycle of poverty for the rest of their lives. I very much identify with those kids that were here today because that's my own experience as an immigrant. And coming here at age 16 and being able to go to a high school for the last year and being lost and not knowing what to do. And my personal experience was going to a counselor that I had never met to talk about college, because when I departed my country, my mother said, no matter what, you're going to go to college because that's the only way to achieve the American dream. That's all I knew that I needed to do. And the counselor, as I was sharing with my colleague here, wrote in a little piece of paper a name and gave it to me. That's all that happened. And it was a wonderful, well-meaning lady. And I asked my friends, what does this mean? It was Lindsay Hopkins. And then I learned that it was the name of a trade school. And I said, what is a trade school? A trade school is a place where you go and become a carpenter, a plumber, and electrician. And I said, well, that's nice, but that's not what my mother told me I needed to do. And so the journey for me began right there, trying to find, frankly, how to navigate the system. It was very complex, so I can really relate to that. And my own experience have taught me that the only way that we can really make sure that these, especially low-income students, first-generation college students, is by making sure we provide them with a real holistic support system that allows them to not only understand how it works, but to be able to navigate it in such a way that they have successful, a successful ending. So, as I said in closing, it's not rocket science, but it takes a lot of persistence. It has to be very intentional, and it requires partners. You can never do it alone. One institution cannot do it alone. We are very fortunate to have very willing partners in Miami who are working together to help us make that transition. And we as a system are able to attract, I think now about 40, I don't know if it's 46 or 48% of all the graduates of that system, and that is because we have made it so easy for them to make the transition.
Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you for sharing your personal story, which also lies to the passion for this and how important this was work for you. I want to draw out a couple of things that you said that I think go to those themes that I brought up. The formalized collaboration. You talked about the relationship you have with principals. We're going to come back to that after I give your colleagues a chance to talk, and I want to, like, how you went about that and how that there might have been barriers in place for that. The family connection, which we haven't talked about. We've talked about across system levels, but where the family fits in that, I think, is a really important piece to draw out. The students talked about coaches on site and eating lunch with their coaches, but you were talking about having somebody in the high school with the students and understanding their stories, and an important partnership about that. And I have to say, too, you brought up the FAFSA. As a parent of a senior, you are absolutely right. So that was quite an experience. But let me go on. Sonia, I want to talk about Baltimore City Schools. You're working to help students with their parents to see education and training beyond high school as necessary for long-term success. And it remains a challenge to make sure students are prepared for success when they leave high school. How are you working to close that preparation gap and accelerate students into college, career, and beyond?
So I think a lot of what we're working on in very much the early stages is a lot of what we've already heard. And so a couple of things that I would highlight that we're doing is, number one, and I was glad to hear Eduardo say the alignment of curriculum, which sometimes people think is just automatic. That isn't that what schools do, right? You go to school, you assume you're learning what you need to go to the next level. And what we found in Baltimore City is that that's not the case. And so to the point of just what that alignment looks like. For us, when we were looking at our preparation, I was glad that Eduardo brought up math and science in particular. We have large numbers of our young people, because our community is connected to tech fields, to science fields, and many of which, there are jobs that don't require necessarily a 4-year bachelor's degree, but do require a significant post-secondary credential that is not just something you go in, fill out a form, and now you've got your credential. You still need substantial work in mathematics and science. And one of the things we found was going all the way back to our middle grades, to the point that it begins long before kids are seniors in high school. What we've started doing is revamping and aligning throughout our district. We've always had high schools that excel in math and science, and that's kind of the top 5 to 10% of young people in the district. But looking at employment opportunities within Baltimore City, part of what we've done, and it also gets to the point of community perception and family perception, is it really has been work in breaking down the understanding, or I'd say the myth, that it's okay not to necessarily be good in these subjects, because somebody will hand you a hammer and you'll be able to make a family sustaining wage just from being able to handle a hammer. And that is not true anymore. And so a lot of what we've been doing is working with families, community organizations, grassroots organizations to say, actually, what is the level, right, that is required now, even if you don't want to necessarily go straight to a 4-year institution, but if you want to be able to obtain a viable post-secondary certification. And so part of what's beginning to happen is the conversations are shifting, even among families, among community, and the understanding that there really is not much of a gap anymore between what young people need to know if you are going straight to a 4-year experience and what young people need to know if they are going into a post-secondary training. And that has been eye-opening for a lot of our families who just did not understand that. And quite frankly, it was community folklore. And I mean, I still get it to this day. I think the second piece, though, from a systems perspective, is we have done some equity mapping around where are those opportunities? Where are those opportunities? Are they in every zip code? Do we have the coursework aligned across the system rather than just relying on 1 or 2 high schools with admissions criteria to kind of carry the day? How are we doing that across the school system? And so that's been a lift. And then I think the other piece I would say, which is interesting, because this is my second day this week starting with hearing from young people, we had a forum within Baltimore City with our own young people, and we asked them a very similar question. What do we need to do better? What are your experiences around feeling like you are ready for college and career after? And a lot of what we heard was very similar to what we heard from young people here today earlier. And one of the things that came through loud and clear was that our information, the knowledge that families and young people need to have to be able to navigate the system is woefully short still. And so some of the things that we're putting in place, which for us is level setting, is beginning in 6th grade and continuing through high school at each point, because we have a middle school, high school transition that mirrors some of the challenges between high school and college. And so part of what we've done is this idea of planning, and I loved the young woman who talked about pulling out her plan again, even in college, to make sure she was on track. Well, we're actually beginning that even in high school. So kids are coming to high school, bringing the plan, knowing ahead of time what they think they might want to do. We're not expecting 12-year-olds to necessarily know what they want to do when they're 25, but it is an exercise in planning and understanding what are the sequencing of experiences that young people need to have, and making that explicit, because more often than not, a lot of what we're hearing, not only in Baltimore, but I think we heard today, is that a lot of information that gets passed around dinner tables in homes where people have gone through this process, it is not that families, a lot of our families don't want to know, don't value the education. That's not the issue. The issue is that that information is not explicit. We have made it a hidden code, and we have said, find it on your own. Instead of being honest, instead of being forthright, instead of providing the guidance along the way. And so what we're trying to do through this planning process is also use that to frankly better equip our teachers with our counselors, those who are based in schools, with something that is a two-way communication with families, as opposed to I go to my counselor and just expect the counselor to direct the whole conversation. Actually building agency in families and teaching families how to advocate for their young people with a plan and with knowledge of what those steps are, because we feel as if we're getting the best traction in places where families are equipped with the information, students are equipped with the information, and then frankly, we as educators can be mutually held accountable. So that's some of the work that we've started doing.
Thank you for that. I'm just drawing out some of the key things, and I think that the important point both of you just made, which was the alignment of curriculum. Like, we just make this assumption, and being more purposeful across the various systems is really something that we've got to drive home here. I appreciated your comment about the community folklore, about what it takes to be either successful career or college, and dispelling those myths is a big part of a responsibility for system leaders. And then driving home this point about family involvement too. We'll come back to that. I want to just put a thought in your head. I'm going to come back to you said you've done an assessment of what are the opportunities in your community, and I want to talk about the ways in which you formalize collaboration to get at what those opportunities are. But first of all, I want to come to you, Pedro. Under your leadership in Pennsylvania, the state has deepened its focus on providing high-quality career pathways, especially in STEM fields. And we heard from Emily about her experience in STEM fields. And if you could just talk to us about what Pennsylvania is doing to address equity gaps to ensure all students have a high-quality pathway beyond high school, particularly in those STEM fields.
No, absolutely. Thank you for the question. And I have to take a moment and thank my colleagues in sharing beforehand, because it was able to kind of help me process it and make some connections that we tend to take for granted sometimes when we're working through the institution. And we realized we had to take a step back in the State Department of Ed, in the Commonwealth of PA, because we realized that at first we needed to focus on our why. Why were we doing this? Why were we engaging in meaningful collaboration and alignment? And and ultimately what we came to, just to kind of serve as our North Star, was that through this lens of equity, the State Department needs to set conditions to ensure all of our students, all of our learners are college, career, and community ready. So whenever you want to engage in the work and you want to get highly technical, or you want to engage in more aspirational conversation, it's always important to really engage and look and focus on that North Star. So through that, we had to engage in a number of strategies and be deliberate. We knew in PA we had to start early. As both of my colleagues shared, we know we weren't starting early enough. And through our ESSA plan and really reimagining stakeholder engagement, we're one of the few states that has the distinction of starting college and career exploration as early as elementary school. I mean, even our kindergartners are engaged, through our what we call 339, but our college career readiness plan. So we first want to focus on career exploration. We want to then transition from career exploration to career preparation. and then career preparation to to focused readiness. So I'll kind of share with you really quickly what that looks like in elementary school. And we start to see it. It's great when I get to visit kindergarten classes, and they're already starting to have conversations around career pathways. And you walk in and you start to see a kid engaging in a lesson, and something as simple as putting on a lab coat to engage in that lesson and discussing, all right, so as we get into a pre-STEM type of activity, which could be simple direction, how you're going to make something move. This is what scientists do. Now, by lab coat, I mean a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up and it's a scientist on it, right? But transitioning from those kindergarten classes and then into third grade to be, a little more intentional around exploration to middle schools where you take a career inventory. We make a free career inventory in Pennsylvania available to every teacher, in the Commonwealth for their students. And then students can start to really engage a little deeper around interest inventory and how their interests align to potential careers and whether or not that's a livable wage career and what type of lifestyle would that engage in. And then as they transition from middle school going into career pathways or looking specifically at readiness in our high schools. And so looking at that K-12 into post-secondary continuum. Now, knowing that, we also knew we had to focus a bit on educator preparedness. Looking at that pre-K to K-12 to higher ed continuum was a real disconnect for us. And so we tried to look, to be a little more deliberate around creating those partnerships and those pathways, engaging, as was shared earlier, we brought counselors together through a counseling symposia where K-12 guidance counselors came together with college admission counselors to discuss what a warm or a soft handoff may look like from one institution to the other, to better understand what criteria for engagement and criteria for successful transition was. And we didn't just kind of say, well, come together and have a great conversation, and we trust that something's going to happen as a result of this this partnership. After bagels and a cup of coffee, there's going to be a great relationship between all parties. We actually adopted a post-secondary attainment goal in the Commonwealth, and we said by the year 2025, over 60% of Commonwealth residents between 25 and 64 were going to have some type of industry certificate, 2-year degree or 4-year degree, with a focus on underrepresented communities. So our state board adopted that goal, one, to kind of put our feet to the fire and to commit us to this work moving forward. And then if you ask, why did you adopt a goal that looks, that identifies, success in that way, is because we realized that in Pennsylvania, over 63% of jobs in the next 10 years were going to require some type of industry certificate or degree. 93% of STEM-related jobs are going to require some type of industry certificate and degree. And we're only at a little over 45% of those individuals within that age span in the Commonwealth holding those credentials. And when we looked at our Black community, that was only at 27%. And when we looked at our Latino community, that was 23%. So when folks started to ask, well, why did you want to focus, on underrepresented communities? He said, because the data and the workforce data shows that we need to be much more intentional around what our post-secondary attainment goals were. And so we used that to create that alignment. We used that to create our vision moving forward. But we also realized that we needed to create, really strong alignment and really, a real strong advocacy around this work. And so we took a lot of time to travel the Commonwealth to solicit feedback from stakeholders. And, realizing especially, in our state that a lot of the workforce demands were geographically driven. What STEM sounds and looks like in one community it looks very different in other communities. So we set a standard, we set a baseline, we set an expectation. And what we're doing now is working cross-agency, with purpose to provide opportunities for industry certificate attainment, 2-year and 4-year degree attainment that meets the needs of local business and industry. So we realized by getting that local buy-in, they're engaging in the workforce. And I know the question was specific to STEM, but what we realized as a result of this evolution of the workplace and the workforce, STEM has had to be the foundation, of everything we do. So for us, we're moving away from STEM kind of being that standalone thing that you do for an hour every day, to being an integrated approach from, as I shared, from kindergarten all the way through high school, as well as equity no longer being that thing you check off on a box, but a lens by which you do everything and engage with everyone across the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Pedro. I'm super encouraged by the start early and create those possibilities. We heard that from the students this morning, like the believing in us and giving us opportunities and starting so early makes such a difference. About the possibilities. We'll come back to you on this, the state post-secondary goal, because I'm guessing that you all then kind of outlined who does what and whose responsibility gets into that as we talk about that formalized collaboration. Mike, I'm going to finally come to you. And Tennessee is known for this drive to 55. You guys have sustained it over quite a bit of time and transitions. You're used as one of the high examples of the ways in which you can do it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Drive to 55 brought K-12 and higher ed together, and then maybe just some of the highlights over the years that you've been doing this?
I think first and foremost, at this point, we've got 150-year-old silos between a public education system and the secondary sector and the post-secondary sector. What Drive to 55 did was just allow us to just fundamentally put those silos aside. I was listening to those students earlier, and I was encouraged by their stories, but incredibly discouraged that it's that hard to go to college in America, and that these students are having to put together this incredibly complex equation just to get a college degree. And I think that has driven a lot of our work in Tennessee to say it should never be that hard. And if it is that hard, then obviously the students that are going to succeed are the ones that have some leg up. And I don't think we've ever believed that's an American principle. And so what Drive to 55 did is allowed us to first put out a very clear data-based goal developed by Tony Carnevale's shop at Georgetown. 55% of Tennesseans are going to need a college degree by 2025. Second, it enabled us, now that we had a unifying goal, to really carry the message that this was an emergency. This was a public opportunity emergency. And for those whose kids were not being able to go to some training beyond high school, if you viewed it as your kid, then you would approach it in an emergent way. And I think we've been very lucky first to have 3 successive K-12 chiefs, Kevin Huffman, Candace McQueen, and now Penny Schwinn, who share the urgency that higher education has in Tennessee, that this is a very human endeavor. We took on 3 things. First, the narrative around going to college. Talk about Pell-eligible students and the fact many of them could go to community college for free anyway. They don't know what Pell Grant is. They don't know what tuition is, nor should they. And so we did do away with that whole thing with free college. That to Tennessee Promise experiment, we've learned a few things. The message matters. So what I used to say is if you fill out this 108-question monstrosity known as the FAFSA, which, if you were going to design something to prevent people from going to college, it's what you would come up with. If you fill out this 108-page form, you might get enough money to go. I don't know. We'll have to see how it turns out. It's a very different message than you go free. Yeah. So our college going rate went up that year 5% in 12 months, the largest college going rate increase of any state ever that we can detect. Our low-income student participation went up 17%. So that was year 1 of Tennessee Promise. And where it's gotten us now is a new normal. The second thing we had to address is remediation. If you're trying to reach an attainment goal, you can't do that on a treadmill. And remediation is a treadmill, especially math remediation. And with some great collaborative relationships with our K-12 department, in Tennessee, in the vast majority of our districts, not all of them due to some technology limits, but in the vast majority of your districts, if you test below the ACT College Ready Cut, your senior year math is remedial math. It's called the SAILS program, Seamless Alignment and Integration of Learning Support. If you think about it, once we had charted it out and a community college had piloted it down in Chattanooga, we thought, why didn't we always do this? Because right now, every Tennessee student takes the ACT when they're juniors. We know if they're going to need remediation or not, and instead we were putting them in a high school senior math that had no correlation or linkage to higher ed. So our remediation need for math has dropped 15 points in 4 years, which is the kind of data you run 4 times to make sure it's right. And we'll take that. And then the last thing we've tried to address is really thinking through dual enrollment. I think dual enrollment is broken. I think it's become a vehicle for students already going to college to show up as juniors. That's great. I think we can probably use dual enrollment as a vehicle for 2 things. One, a student who never thought they could go to college gets a shot and says, I can do this. And then second, maybe a student who's not going to progress beyond high school. They're just not going to for whatever reason. I want them to, but they may not. Could we give them 4 courses of meaningful post-secondary work in a technical field that enables them to either 1, show up at one of our technical colleges accelerated, or 2, have some short-term credential that enables them to have, I think, a boosted potential in the workforce. That's the one we're under the hood on as we speak. You know, the first 2 narratives around remediation and changing how you go to college, I think we're there. We need to stay at it to be sure. But thinking about how we transform dual enrollment into a true vehicle for access, that's where we are now. And I'll tell you, our single biggest challenge is the perception of dual enrollment within K-12 buildings, where most counselors rightfully say, who takes dual enrollment? Oh, all my high achievers. I don't know about that. Plenty of students with an 18 or 19 on the ACT go to college, or 17 or 16. Why couldn't we give them a shot at dual enrollment? That's going to take a while, but I think we're making really good progress. And to come full circle, the Drive to 55 has allowed us to have an umbrella. We don't do increments in Tennessee. I don't do increments at all. And I have a bias toward do everything all the time. And when you've got the stats we've got, you have to. And that's what we've done. The Drive to 55 is becoming an umbrella for about 18 separate initiatives. And we're going to keep adding them. And I think the net result so far is that our attainment rate has gone up 7% in 4 years, which is, again, one of the faster rates in America, from 36% to almost 43%. I actually think that's going to accelerate over the next few years. But the core of that is a K-12 enterprise and a higher ed enterprise that play zero turf and collaborate kind of as a matter of course.
Thanks, Mike. There's so much in that to unpack. The Tennessee Promise that you all have put in place, the sales program that you've seen great work on, the dual enrollment that you mentioned, but you also talked about this through line of your K-12 commissioners, 3 of them that have continued to see this through, and I'm assuming at the higher ed level too. It's transcended across leaders to become a big part of it, and I think your description of the umbrella of a big goal for everybody is kind of one of those ways in which we figure it out. Rather than it being a specific initiative, it's the ways in which we get to that big goal. And I'd love for you just to talk about, we talk so much in education about collaboration. We give it a lot of lip service, right? And it's really hard to actually formalize it and make it something that we move forward. I'd love for you to give us an under the hood impression of what gets in the way of that? What are some of the things that you guys have encountered early on in that program? And then what were the incentives obviously are that we all want things to be better for kids, but how do you get people at the table? And I'm going to do a whip around after I ask Mike to give us a historical view on that.
For us, getting people at the table has been about having something meaningful to talk about that isn't just the concept of collaboration. And, something I learned in the Army was in my unit, if we needed to work with an aviation unit, the best way to do that was to plan a mission together. And so our first mission was FAFSA. I was as troubled by the FAFSA as Dr. Padron is. We're proud of the fact that we are leading often. But by the way, in 2 southern states are trading first and second place. A bunch of students are winning. And I'm proud of Louisiana. So our first mission was get everyone around the table and let's plan how we manage the FAFSA thing. And our first concept was a pretty mind-blowing thing that we would have a list of seniors, that we would track who did the FAFSA. And if they hadn't done the FAFSA, we'd call them. We'd help them do the FAFSA. That sounds so basic, but I think people were embarrassed to suggest it. Nobody was doing that. And by the way, most of your schools aren't either. Most principals don't know one of two things: who did the FAFSA and where they're going to college. Most don't. And the first time I suggested it, I got laughed out of the room. Well, we would never do that. Well, we did. And our FAFSA campaign has largely been about a massive communications outreach campaign that at the end of it, we looked around the table and said, whoa, we just collaborated, versus get together and have a meeting about how we should collaborate.
Yeah. Sounds like such a novel idea.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that point about having a mission together and actually doing it, being a big part of that.
And I knew we'd gotten there when one of the K-12 commissioners' performance goals was also one of mine in my evaluation.
Yeah.
So we shared a line in our evaluations about FAFSA completion.
That's fantastic. Eduardo, I want to come back to the formalizing the principal relationship and just go back to my question about like what gets in the way of these formalized collaborations. How did you overcome those kinds of things?
Well, one of the issues that we need to admit is the fact that when we are concerned about the equity issue, because I think it's a national imperative. When we look at the demographics of this country, the only way we're going to keep our position as a superpower and be able to compete in the world arena is by making sure that we harness the potential of everyone. Mm-hmm. I always say that talent is universal, what's not universal is opportunity. And so in dealing with the issue of collaboration, two things to keep in mind. Number one, we need to find a way of providing the necessary incentives to the schools that are really putting the good effort into this. And otherwise, we have a real problem of distribution of resources. We need to find ways in which we can redistribute resources based on results of schools that are really doing a good job in addressing this issue. Otherwise, if we don't provide incentive, a lot of the schools that are serving these underserved communities are not only under-resourced, but they are understaffed, and they do not have necessarily any incentive to be able to do this other than the goodness of their heart, which is important. But we need to be realistic about it. Without the resources, it takes more money to address these issues and these efficiencies than other schools that are getting students that come from families that have been to college, that have the resources, that parents are involved, understand the system, etc. So if we're going to really fix the problem, we need to find a way of providing the necessary incentive for the schools to be able to do a better job. We found that no matter what you do at the district level, and you could have wonderful signing ceremonies and all that, and press releases, if the high school principal is not really interested, if the high school principal doesn't make the commitment to have a persistent and consistent effort that is very intentional to make this the center priority of that school. And the same with the college, same thing. It will not really happen to the level that it should be. You know, you have a press release, it's the flavor of the day, everybody's happy, oh, we're gonna do this, but you get to the office and then you have other things. Unless you really buy into this, as I say, with heart and passion, it will not happen. So what we decided to do was, first of all, make sure that we stop the blame game. And the blame game was where the college blames the high school because the students do not come well prepared, and that's why they fail. And the high school blames the junior high, and the junior high blames the elementary, and the elementary blames the parents because they did not provide the students with a good initial step, right? So we all blame each other. And so that's number one. Number two, there must be a real level of respect among professionals, that because you are high school and you are college, no one is better than the other, and we come to the table as partners with equal intentions and equal purpose. And then you have to make sure that there is a mutual understanding that this is a win-win game. It cannot be that it's going to be the benefit to the college or a benefit to the high school. We all win, because when the students win, we all win, right? So as long as you have that understanding, I think it's very important to begin to make the connections that are needed. So it's almost, the synergy that happens is so important. We host 2 entire high schools at the college, 2 of them. And it's incredible how the attainment, but also the collaboration and everything that needs to fall into place for success happens. Most of the students, I would say in one of them is almost 100%, in the other one is the largest percentage of the students, get the AA degree 1 month before they get, the high school diploma 1 month before they get the AA degree. And the reason is that the graduation for the high school is in June, our graduation is in May. But the point that I'm trying to make is that these collaborations have to be institutionalized and have to be constantly monitored and have to be constantly pursued, because it's very easy, again, to become the flavor of the day and not the thing that you need to commit to, because it's important to your community, it's important to the nation. And there is no other way. It takes real commitment.
I want to draw out something both you and Mike hit on and really drive it home, which is this, that it can't be just an extra initiative or extra work, that it has to be a part of the work, right? And you talked about resources, but even if we think about streamlining work of counselors, Pedro, you talked about the counselors and how we can ease that burden, but also drive towards the same goal. Really, I think I'm hearing a theme here. So, Pedro, I want to ask you about the state post-secondary goal. Come back to that. And when was that set? How long has it been in place?
Almost a couple years now.
Yeah. So you're still relatively new into it, and probably have some perspectives on the what's gotten in the way to kind of maybe a little bumpier of a start. But you do have an overall umbrella goal, which probably is helpful. So.
Yeah. No, it's extremely helpful. As I shared a bit earlier, it at least provides that North Star. It provides direction. It sets a condition, and for us, for me as a state chief, it provides for some continuity. I mean, we know that, one of the battles we always have in government, as I'm learning, having been a practitioner, is the pendulum always swings, and some folks just kind of wait us out. So by putting a goal in place, the goal will be around much longer than the state chief will. But we also solidify the goal and the mission by something Eduardo shared, and that was by bringing folks to the table and engaging in meaningful collaboration. What we learned, especially representing the state and representing a state institution, if I get my community at large and stakeholders involved, they continue the work, and they actually make the work much more meaningful. And then as a result, their local lawmakers and my other partner agencies take it much more seriously, and they invest themselves.
I was at a meeting we hosted this last week for career readiness work, and our colleagues from Michigan were talking about their overarching umbrella goal, and they actually created a document that had roles for every agency and every group that was working on that, so everyone knew kind of where they were adding to the overarching goal. And it seems as simple as putting it on a piece of paper for everyone and coming to an agreement, rather than saying we're going to meet once a month. We're going to talk about where are you at on your particular initiative, but how all those things intertwine seems to be a really important part of that. Sonia, I want to come back to the opportunities in the community. You talked a lot about how you've been working across the community to figure out those opportunities. What does that look like, and what have been some of the challenges?
So part of what it looks like is we started probably about 2.5 years ago now. That's about as long as I've been there. Doing what we call equity mapping across Baltimore City. So what we have done is looked at kind of historically, where are the underserved communities? How does that relate to the city's history of redlining and other things? And then literally saying, what's our role in that? Right, so yes, we could just flop it all off on housing, but what are the instructional, what are the educational decisions that we've made? And so what we have started doing is for our more under-resourced, or what we call our underinvestment, communities that have been underinvested in, we have a scale, and so we match kind of all of our resources, whether they are financial, whether they are who are our most experienced principals, all the way down to which young people are get a chance to experience early career exposure or anything else. And so as part of that discussion, what's happened is it's led us to say, where are the places, and I love what Eduardo said earlier, that we have to reconcile both as a system and as a community, that it is going to require more attention and more support, right? When you are talking about creating opportunities for traditionally underserved and underinvested communities. And so the way that we map, for example, a lot of what we've been talking about today is we ask ourselves, so where are our strongest counselors? Where are our more robust partnerships going? We have a partnership with College Bound that does a lot of very similar work to the ACES program that you heard about in Montgomery this morning. And one of the things we've started doing with a lot of our partners is actually saying, where do you want to go, right? Like if you're only supporting the schools and the communities that already have a trajectory of growth or achievement, right, or success, right, then we're the ones from a district position kind of asking the hard questions and really, frankly, forcing people to go to different communities, and by zip code we do this. So we look and we say, where are the more robust university partners working, and frankly redirect, sometimes it feels like guilt, them into saying, nobody has gone here. And why? And is it because it's harder? Is it because it requires more resource from all the partners involved? And what that's done in a city, I think, that because of some of the more kind of recent challenges and kind of post-Freddie Gray Baltimore, it's actually been a rallying cry. And I'm sitting here thinking about the common goal piece that I think is really important. For us, it is, I think the common goal was almost in reverse. It was a common recognition from various sectors of the community that, are we still here in 2000 plus? And so that's actually what brought people to the table, and the willingness to actually peel back really hard discussions about, a lot of institutions, including the school district, I know how to jigger data. I know how to say that we've increased in this way or that way, and not actually get underneath to say that a lot of the drivers of that growth are coming from a particular area in the city. But that if we disaggregate by region, if we disaggregate by zip code, by map, actually, a lot of our stuff doesn't look as good as we think it does. And so, having hard conversations, like even with philanthropic and business leaders, like, does everybody want to go to the schools where you're going to have a great big shiny press conference? Or are you willing to be able to dig in the places where we need to do a little more work? And it frankly has caused us, and one of the, Matt knows this because as we've been having discussions around the career tech audit that we've been doing as a district, we've been asking ourselves, which high schools do we dig in deeply with first? And who is the principal there? And do we need to change the principal, because the lift we know we need is going to require someone who's going to partner with Eduardo with a sense of gusto, even if they are in, again, a different zip code. So I think for us, as we have started looking at this, it is a compounding of underinvestment. It is not just in one area. And what it does is it allows us to be more accountable and truthful about, are we really pushing the needle in the places that, frankly, the needle needs to be pushed most?
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to do what John did, which is give you guys all a chance to answer one final question as we wrap down today. There's so much more we could talk about, and you all have been a great source of that information. But how can we catalyze more places to do this? If you could give advice, because you all are working really hard on this and you've been making some great strides, you've been forthright about some of the challenges that you're having, but if you could help catalyze for your fellow state chiefs, for other higher ed commissioners, K-12 leaders, what's some advice you might give them in a snapshot for us? I'll just open it up.
I'll start us off. I think opportunities like this are a great first start. Highlighting some of the amazing practice out there, setting the conditions to make connections really bringing, forward that this is a national issue, because quite often, especially in a position of, of leadership, it's a lonely position. So knowing that there are other resources, other opportunities to collaborate or commiserate, depending on how you see it, is important. And especially specific to state chiefs, we're pretty aggressive. We like to compete. We're competitive. So for example, already have Tennessee and Louisiana might cross hairs. We'll figure that out. But at the end of the day, as we highlight these partnerships and opportunities, it helps us build that collaboration to a common goal. So great first step.
Thank you, Pedro. I'll open it up to anybody else.
I'm a big fan of disaggregated data. We released a report not long ago about remediation that even though our remediation has gotten better, we released the report by high school. And so it's a lot different to say, 51% of students need remediation, but the reality is at this high school, 80% need remediation. And I think if I were trying to catalyze the work, that sort of personal data is the thing that gets chambers involved. It gets county mayors involved, and I think we always view it as a win. If I'm talking about higher education is great at calling meetings of the choir, and everybody in higher ed sits in a room and talks to each other about higher ed. It's really powerful when county mayors or county commissioners and school board members are riled up about attainment in their county. That to me, we've been able to get there, but that front end effort to enlist the non-education industrial complex in an education issue, I think would be really powerful.
Thank you, Mike.
I would just say from a K-12 system leader standpoint, I think it really is this idea that Pedro noted about making sure that we're exchanging best practices. I mean, I get most of my best ideas from folks that are already have either started doing it, that I can send my folks to visit. They know what and I know Eduardo's getting ready to retire, but I've already said before his dance card is full. I want to make sure, right, that we can get some of our folks to visit and see what's happening. And I think just the ability to put on the table that we need to break the silos down and just admit that everybody's work is up for grabs in this sense, that we all get to sit around the table and say, actually, it would be really helpful if we changed here. That's where I think this kind of cross-sector partnership and just, like I said, the ability to learn and see what other people are doing.
Well, I agree with everything that has been said, especially with Mike, because I really feel that it takes a village to be able to do this, and it's not just in the back of higher ed or K through 12, in its involvement of our local political leaders, and as I said, it's a national imperative, and we need to make this really a very strong national voice and make sure that the country is aware of the implications. Usually when we talk about education, nobody's dying because of the lack of or the issues that are going. So always take a second seat in terms of priorities. But the fact of the matter is that the country will die if we don't fix this problem. And we need to make sure people understand that. And we need to understand that poverty matters. And for many of the families that we're trying to serve, for many of them, like the students that were here today, they live at the margin. Life happens to them more often than other students. And these students need a special support. If we really mean what we're saying here, these students need to be supported at a much higher level, and they need to know that we care about them and show them the way. And that takes a lot of thought, that takes a lot of resources, and not necessarily more resources, but somehow making sure the resources go where the need is.
Thank you all for your leadership on this. I want to just wrap us up and where I started, which was some of the key things as system leaders. And you all have given us some other things that I think iteration 2 of this report will include. But mutually committing to student success, having that common agenda. We heard that over and over again from you all about the important umbrella and focus on that. The formalized collaboration, like it's a part of everybody's work, which is what you have said over and over again. And then ensuring sustainability, that it isn't just across even you as leaders, but all leaders that come into this and the moral imperative that we have to do this. I think the key thing for all of us in the community and state leaders have to be laser focused, and you all talked about this, on helping significantly more students of color, low income students that have been the first in their family to attend college, that those gaps are ones that we cannot ignore in this work and must be really, really focused on. I want to just highlight a couple of the collaborative things that we've talked about. Just to close us out, there's the courses that help traditionally underserved students catch up on skills gap prior to high school graduation. That was one of the things that was brought up. The opportunities to speed up post-secondary transitions through earning early post-secondary credits. The revised approaches to higher education placement and remediation that we're hearing about. Expanding advising opportunities in the college application and matriculation process for first-year students. And then career pathways with labor market value. And all of you have talked about that, but that's highly outlined in the report, and I hope you all will have a chance to look at that. Please join me in thanking this esteemed panel.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you very, very much, Carissa, and to the whole panel. Very inspiring, and thanks for your candor. We're going to wrap up now for those who are watching online, and thanks to everyone who's been in the room and bearing with us. Really, really powerful conversations today, both from our adult leaders and especially from our young people, to remind us of why we're doing this. I'm really heartened by the level of commitment and the depth of the challenge, but that we're ready to take it on. I do believe, Eduardo, it is a national imperative. I think we all believe that. It doesn't necessarily mean there are always national solutions or that the solutions will emanate from this city. I'll be clear about that. In fact, our belief is that the solutions are going to come from folks like you who are driving this work in the states and the communities, and that we at the national level need to figure out how to embrace that and encourage it and expand it. So that's really what Level Up is all about. I do want to thank all the partner organizations, once again, who are part of this, and the staffs from those organizations that has worked with us over the last few months to put the report together and to plan the activities. So thank you. I want to especially thank the Education Strategy Group team that's worked hard to get this organized over the last several months, and that will continue to plug away at this. I was sort of listening to some of your ideas, and just a few things that I want to stress here. Eduardo, you said it, stop the blame game. I think we all need to just recognize that it's not the other person's problem. It's a collective problem, and that this is going to require collective solutions. So I was really glad to hear you say that, and we need to figure out a way to build that culture of respect and to set a table that allows the win-win to occur. And we're going to really be looking for folks to help advise us on how to create that environment around the country where it feels like it's a win-win and not an us versus them. And then, Mike, your point of not collaboration for collaboration's sake. I can't stress that enough. I know collaboration is hard, and it does take routines, and sometimes routines aren't sexy. They're necessary, but at the end of the day, we all want to be accomplishing something. So we are on a mission in this campaign, and we know it's going to take those routines, and we know collaboration is an essential ingredient, but it has to be toward a particular end. So Pedro's idea of having a goal, and Sonia's notion that we need to get to families and students and make sure they understand the realities of the world they're going to be facing when they graduate. Kind of those are the core meat, and the routines will help get us there. But we appreciate the mission idea, and Pedro and others, and Eduardo said it, we don't want this to be the flavor of the day. So we will have failed in this Level Up effort if this becomes the flavor of the day. And we had a great press release. We issued a report. People read it. They came to the event, and they thought it was a great event. We will have succeeded if we can show year after year there are more communities, there are more states that are really making this a priority and are moving the needle by taking aggressive policy action and seeding local activities that can make a difference. We are really challenging every community and state in the country to make this a #1 priority, or at least a top 3, and we're going to try to be there to support you. We'd like to see that list of states grow, as you see here on this map, really to cover everywhere. We want examples all over the country. We'd like state leaders making this a priority all over the country over the next few years. That's our goal. We're doing it as a collaborative effort across organizations, and those organizations are hopefully showing how we can break down the silos and work more closely together on our mission. So we really appreciate everyone joining us here today. Please help us light up this map over the next few years and make this the reality for students and not the exception. We know it's doable. We've seen there are places that know how to do it. Help us spread the word. Help us catalyze action. Again, thank you everyone for being here, and we look forward to great work together in the years ahead. Thanks very much.